that out of this today, that you get a sense of the need for a comprehensive assessment to think about these folks who have complex neuropsychiatric or responsive behaviors, that that assessment can help with communication, and that assessment is P.I.E.C.E.S. And how something like that can help us think about creative care planning, think about the whole person and how to do that, how we incorporate those things in behavioral care plans. There are many different ways of talking about behavioral disturbances, the DSM-5 term, associated with the major neurocognitive disorders. So some of them are BPSD, behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. That goes back to 1999. Dementia-related protective behaviors, where does that come from? GPA, gentle persuasive approach. Neuropsychiatric symptoms of dementia is in research literature. It's in a lot of the literature, right, that we read about, particularly from psychiatry. How about responsive behaviors? Where does that come from? MEREP, the Murray Alzheimer's Research Education Program. I think the different terms actually help to highlight the multiple causality that you have to think about when you care plan for folks with neuropsychiatric symptoms. What I do think is important is thinking about the target symptom, being able to define the target symptom so that you can translate that into your care plans and be accurate about it, and also not to jump to conclusions. This approach and understanding is echoed in many different ways in publications. I really like the work of Dr. Helen Kales. She's a professor in psychiatry at the University of Michigan, and she has done some really great research and writing on neuropsychiatric symptoms of dementia. And she actually had a shout out to geriatric psychiatrists, a reminder to us. It was called Common Sense. Addressed to geriatric psychiatrists on the subject of BPSD. And she said, reject the search for one magic bullet for BPSD. There is not one. We have to think about the person, and you need a way to think about. Condemn approaches that involve the reflexive use of psychotropic medication. Now, there may be a role, an appropriate role for medication, but it shouldn't necessarily be the absolute first thing we think about. Embrace non-pharmacological strategies. You may see in research more and more the term eco-psychosocial to replace the word non-pharmacological. Eco-psychosocial is a more positive expression of what we need to do for care planning, as opposed to this kind of confrontational model that's kind of developed. And enlighten and advocate the world about how to assess these problems. And I just want you to know that as a geriatric psychiatrist, we do take this very, very seriously. So this is a campaign, it follows one from the United States with respect to many aspects of medical care, and having conversations, doctors and folks, about appropriate treatments or inappropriate treatments. And the Canadian Academy of Geriatric Psychiatry contributed to the two, actually, of the 13 recommendations from psychiatry. So you can check that out. Number 12 is don't use antipsychotics as the first choice to treat behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. Now, there are times where that may have to be deferred a little bit after an assessment. There are situations where we do use medications appropriately, particularly for severe aggression and psychotic symptoms in folks with a dementia. But we must integrate the non-pharmacological and the pharmacological if that is the situation. I see often in consults the word non-pharmacological. So a doctor might dictate da-da-da, and they'll say, and don't forget to include non-pharmacological interventions. It includes the big ticket items of mental health in-reach consultation. It includes educational initiatives for frontline staff. And then it includes things like meaningful activity, like individualized music, ways of improving communication. The key is to be able to integrate those into your care plan, and I hope to sort of show that with respect to Anne. There are comprehensive assessment frameworks for neuropsychiatric symptoms. One of them is called DICE. Again, this is Dr. Helen Kales. It was a collaborative out of the University of Michigan and Johns Hopkins. DICE is describe, investigate, create, and evaluate. Describe that target symptom. Investigate, and this is really targeted to physicians. Think about things such as pain, unmet medical needs. Bring that causality thinking to the picture. Create a care plan based on that, and then don't forget to evaluate. Don't forget to check in, like the 6 months on risperidone. If it doesn't work, we've got to think about a different way of approaching it. So always to remember that evaluation. With respect to psychotropic medications, if something has worked successfully and people's behavior has improved, think about whether or not they still need the medication at 3 months and start deciding whether or not you can taper people off. In British Columbia, we have something very, very similar to DICE. It is the BC-BPSD algorithm, and you can find it at www.bcbpsd.ca. There's lots of information there with respect to communication. There's examples for care planning there. So I encourage you to explore it. And it also highlights rating scales. And there's consistency between the algorithm and P.I.E.C.E.S with respect to rating scales, as well as the 48-6 initiative, so that we are all using the same thing and the same tools. And those rating scales can be very, very helpful in clinical care. You can bookmark the algorithm to a smartphone. You can have it right on your home screen, and that's actually how I do carry it around sometimes and utilize it. So P.I.E.C.E.S has come to British Columbia as a comprehensive assessment and communication strategy. And it is a made-in-Canada approach to thinking about these issues. In British Columbia, we basically have 3 P.I.E.C.E.S initiatives. We have one that's kind of based out of Kamloops. We have the provincial tertiary geriatric psychiatry P.I.E.C.E.S initiative, and we have a residential care initiative. Plus, we have the physician workshop for dementia-responsive behaviors that Dr. Liz Drance and I have been doing since about 2015. It's an accredited workshop for family docs and other physicians, all about P.I.E.C.E.S and the algorithm, and really bringing home this non-pharmacological thinking, care planning approach, and appropriate use of medications if necessary. For me, there's an elegance to P.I.E.C.E.S. And the elegance is in its simplicity. It's based on 3 questions. What has changed? What are the risks, and that's an acronym, and possible causes? And what is the action? And that breaks down into intervention, interactions, and information. What I really like about P.I.E.C.E.S is it puts the risk discussion right up front. Because we have to highlight risk in care plans. We have to be able to communicate risk to the folks that are providing care. And so it is an acronym that forces us to remember the whole risk issue. It can be done very quick. You can do a P.I.E.C.E.S safety huddle in 5 minutes. If you have an egregious something or other that happens on the unit and you need to bring the team together to care plan in that moment, you can use the 3-question template in your safety huddles. What has changed? What is the risk? What are the causes? P.I.E.C.E.S, what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to communicate that to the next group of folks coming on shift, for example? Or you can have more elaborate discussions. It depends on how you identify the problem. One thing I want to highlight is under the risks section. R is for roaming, I, imminent physical risk, S, suicide, K, kinship relationships. That's where in the violence prevention program language, so responsive, aggressive, physical behavior, that's where you highlight that risk and where you think about AGG alerts. Does everybody know about the AGG alert purple dots, purple labels. That's one visual cue to communicate if somebody may be at risk of some type of responsive, aggressive behavior towards others. And doctors in the workshops like these tools. We hear that they like the Dementia Observation System, the DOS, where you can look at behavior over 7 days, break it down into half-hour increments. You can get fancy, you can color code that so it's a quick visual snapshot. It's great for looking at sleep very objectively. And things like the Cohen-Mansfield Agitation Inventory, the CMAI. I really like the Cohen-Mansfield Agitation Inventory because it's referenced in literature, in research. So you can actually do a CMAI. You can actually, in a weird way, score it, although it was never really designed to be scored. And you can kind of start to compare, and you can kind of start to get a sense maybe of severity, but you can never take it out of the clinical context. You must always do that. Things like the MOCA are there, the MMSE, and this is all taught in the 24-hour workshop for P.I.E.C.E.S of frontline staff. We do evaluations in our P.I.E.C.E.S workshops. We in tertiary mental health have done them pre and post. Since January of 2015, I think we've had 24 P.I.E.C.E.S workshops, about 590 people. They're co-sponsored between residential care and tertiary mental health. But we do try to look at knowledge translation, knowledge mobilization, so we do complete work, evaluations pre and post, and there is a clear increase in confidence from participants with respect to understanding the tools, understanding the approach. So you can look at it from that perspective. You can also look at it from a broader context perspective as well. I want to say thank you to the BC Patient and Safety Quality Council. They've sponsored the CLEAR initiatives. CLEAR, Call for Less Antipsychotic Use in Residential Care, Waves 1 and Waves 2. And they have been a great supporter of P.I.E.C.E.S, of the physician workshops, of bringing the language of quality improvement to residential care facilities so that those folks have the tools to design meaningful projects for them that will have a positive impact on care. And a lot of creative ideas have come out of the CLEAR initiatives. So just to let you know, for CLEAR Wave 2, from September of 2015 to December of 2016, that's when CLEAR Phase 2 finished, 40 residential care facilities were involved. 37% of people on antipsychotics had them discontinued. 31% of people on antipsychotics had the doses reduced.